enabled that feature for everybody. Awesome. Well, good to see. It's nice to see you, Father Boniface. Nice to see you, Matt, Pat, and Ruth. Awesome. That's so great. Matt, is your lovely wife joining us?
She is on a separate account, so if you haven't made her a co-host for that before, you may need to do that. But
Oh,
she,
okay. I'll do that right now
she
if I
is
can
logged
see.
in.
Oh, there
Yeah.
she is. Okay. I will do that right now. Okay, Erin, you can now show your video, I believe. Hey
There's
there.
beautiful bride.
Well, I can't tell you how exciting it is to be here with this. Well, for sure, with this group of panelists and some old friends and some new friends, and it's just been so great. And some of our collaborations over the last couple of months have been kind of exciting. And so I just want to welcome everyone here. So grateful that you tuned in. And as I was saying before, we have people from all over the country. Also, I saw Canada, UK, and Ireland, and probably other places as well. So welcome everyone. This particular webinar, we kind of were planning it to go just an hour, maybe a bit over an hour, and then maybe do some Q&A. So it won't go the whole 2 hours. I just put 2 hours to be safe, give us lots of time. But just want to let you know that what we'll be doing is kind of talking a lot about parts, about a brief introduction to that. And we'll be doing a little demo, a little parts mapping exercise. So hopefully you'll get a chance to see that. And then after that, we'll hear from our different panelists, their thoughts and reactions, and give you guys a chance, some of you, to ask some questions. So that's what we're up to today. I'd like to go around and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. And maybe I will start since I'm already talking away here. If you don't know me, I'm Dr. Gerry Crete. I live here in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm the author of Litanies of the Heart. I have a copy right here, and I will put in the chat some links to the book and to a few other things you might be interested in. I'm the founder of Transfiguration Counseling and Coaching, and we have therapists and coaches working in multiple states in the United States. And anyhow, I'm a marriage and family therapist and a professional counselor, and I specialize in working with trauma and anxiety disorders. And I've been branching out and wanting to create some new resources and trainings for understanding our parts better, understanding our inmost self and our parts. And just quick, I'm married over 30 years. I have three grown children now that are running around the continent, and one of them is heading to Ireland actually in this summer. So that's just a little bit about me. So how about the sort of Brady Bunch scene that I have. Matt, you are to my right.
Hey, folks. Thank you, Gerry. My name is Matt Ingold. My wife is also here, Erin Ingold. We're the founders of a Catholic coaching company called Metanoia Catholic, where we train and coach other Catholic coaches, and we help people to really become students of their interior lives so that they can really engage in their unique call to sanctity. So love being able to do that. Met a number of the people on the call in person here in Ave Maria, about a month and a half ago, which is kind of where the seeds of this event here was born. And so just want to answer that question: what does a robust vision of Catholic human formation look like for the future? And so this is kind of a fruit of that discussion here. And so really excited to be on the call here. And I'll be playing kind of the vulnerable test dummy in the exercise for parts mapping.
Wonderful. I'm thankful that you're willing to be our test dummy or guinea pig or just our brave soul. How about that? Well, next, how about Erin, if you would introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, Matt did a lot of our introduction, which is great. I am here actually as a student. I am still like, I guess, a parts baby. So still learning about it. Really love it. I love the intricacies of it. We are mindset coaches at Metanoia Catholic. And so these parts play parts in our minds and our hearts within ourselves. And like Matt was saying, we teach people become students of their interior lives. And so this is just a very curious subject that I am excited to go deeper on and really kind of sit at the feet of Dr. Crete and everybody else on here who's been using this work for a long time. So, yeah.
Wonderful. So great to have you. Ruth, if you would introduce yourself.
Hello, it's good to be here. So I have the privilege of working with Gerry, Dr. Gerry at Transfiguration Counseling and Coaching. And I've been there now, I think going on 4 years, if not more. But anyway, I've been married 41 years. I've got 8 kids, 15 grandkids. And actually, Matt this morning sort of put out there in our chat, how do we use parts in the space that we work in? And so I'm going to try and do that in the 30 seconds that you asked for, Matt. So right now, I've been a strengths-based coach for over 20 years, and I've always considered our strengths to be valuable parts of an intricate, one-of-a-kind inner system created in the likeness and image of God. And we were designed to glorify him. So the better we know what that particular brilliance is, the better we can reflect our particular image of God. And so the better we know that, the better we're able to live more fully, more consistently. And so I use the Clifton Strengths Assessment. Like I said, I'm a strengths-based coach. And I have been able to help my clients access parts of themselves that they felt were there, but never really knew how to talk to, didn't know how to understand them or appreciate them. And so together we get to discover their unique strengths, and we get to use them as a pathway, really, to discovering their own deep, rich, diverse system. And so obviously this allows us to work together. We like to facilitate our goal is really to facilitate that relationship between self and parts. And so I feel like strength is like a fast pass to the front of the line for that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. And next, Pat Molyneaux.
Yeah, so hi, my name's Pat Molyneaux. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, married 30 years, have a 20-year-old daughter, Therese, who's at Ohio State. My primary career is we have a home improvement business. But I, about 7 or 8 years ago, co-founded a 501c3 called the Human Formation Coalition. And we coach and train leaders in a modality that's deeply rooted in human formation and Catholic theology. And last July, Dr. Peter reached out to me. I didn't know much about IFS and parts work, and Dr. Peter reached out to me and kind of brought me into this great area of psychological science, and I've been deep into it since then. And we're finding that parts work can be a real game changer in leadership development context. So I've been deep diving. I'm like Erin and Matt, I'm a student. And as a matter of fact, I've got to leave at 1:15 because I have a foundational group with Dr. Peter and after this. So, but just happy to be here, excited to learn, excited to help bring a more robust vision of human formation into the church. So thanks, Gerry, for pulling this together.
Yeah, great to have you. All right, last but definitely not least, Father Boniface, Hicks.
Well, great to be with you and really happy to be on the panel. I'm a Benedictine from St. Vincent Archabbey in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, celebrating my 25th anniversary of vows this year, and was ordained in 2004 as a Catholic priest. And I've been giving spiritual direction since ordination. In the last, I guess about 7 years ago, I co-authored a book on spiritual direction, and about 5 years ago started a school of spiritual direction. But about 10 years ago, I was introduced to parts work and have been seeing have met with hundreds of people and see parts active in spiritual direction in a variety of ways, in the way that people relate with God, in the way that they present themselves in spiritual direction, and the kind of work that the spiritual director can do in helping to understand and work with people's parts, helping them to unblend and helping them to unburden exiles and a variety of things. So I loved Gerry's book, and I've loved so much that I've learned from Dr. Peter at Souls and Hearts and some of my own reading. And I'm just excited to see how this unfolds and how we can help parts work become a more regular part of all of these apostolates, but for me, especially in spiritual direction.
Thank you so much. And part of my effort here has been to make parts work accessible to more people, whether to receive that, the experience of working with our parts, ourselves, but also to train people. And I have it in my heart to work obviously with counselors and therapists, because that's what I am. But I also really want to work with spiritual directors, coaches, mentors, pastors, ministry leaders, anyone who has the job of helping people in need. And so I've this sort of passion. So I'm so excited that this team is here, representing coaches, Father Boniface in spiritual direction, and really wanting to bring that some attention to this and how it can be integrated. I really was hoping that my book would be a kind of a foundation for understanding parts and how it does have a biblical and foundation, and it has a foundation even within our church tradition, even if the language used wasn't always what you see in internal family systems or ego state therapy or any other, or schema therapy or any of these parts approaches. The other passion I have, and I just want to point out, is that some of these modalities, these secular psychological approaches, have some pretty serious problems. And IFS in particular right now, because it's so popular, is so good. This is an amazing approach, but there is a whole movement within IFS and the founder of IFS toward a spirituality that is definitely not Christian. And I really wanted to shine a light on that, but not just to condemn it or anything, but to say, no, we have an amazing tradition, and our tradition aligns extremely well with the best of parts work, actually. And so that's what this book was about. I'm preparing to do a more in-depth kind of training, more information to come on that, but a training for all these helpers, any helpers that want to learn at a deeper level how to apply parts work in whatever ministry or work that you're doing. So I would invite you, I'm going to put it in the chat, a bunch of links for anyone who's interested to join. We have a program called Transfiguration Life. So we have an online community. It's just starting, and Ruth and another coach, Michelle, are kind of spearheading that and doing litanies of the heart book studies. But we're going to have more robust training on there. It's a free community, join for free. And also I'm going to put some links into where to get the book, where on Souls and Hearts to get the free prayers, just the litanies prayers themselves, or listen to the audio versions of those prayers. And I'm also going to invite Matt and Erin, if they want to post in the chat, information on Metanoia Catholic, and also any information people might have on the Institute for Ministry Formation, which I don't know if you mentioned it, but Father Boniface directs that program at St. Vincent College and Seminary. And it's an excellent, robust spiritual direction really a graduate level program in spiritual direction. So I invite you all to put those in the chat, and I'll put them again later in case you need them later, but and just so anybody wants to. So I'm going to have a big chat thing here. It's going to go. Okay. All right. I think those are the links. Hopefully those links. Oh, you know what? Those links didn't translate, so I might have to send them a bit later. You know how I make the hyperlinks? They don't translate into the chat. I'll get those to you. All right. And Ruth might be able to post a few of them as well while we're doing this. Okay, the next thing I really can't wait to do, and it's so exciting, And I'm going to invite all the panelists, if they can, to just take their video out so that during this time, but please stay and listen. And so that Matt and I can do a little work together, and just the two of us will see each other on the screen, and be able to do a little parts mapping. Thank you, Matt, so much for agreeing to work with me.
Gerry, when I'm working with you, man, it's just like there's no fear. You've got a real gift for this. So
Wonderful.
I trust you, man.
Awesome. Well, what I like to do to start with is first just kind of get a little bit comfortable, right? I'm going to be move my mic, make sure it's close enough to me here. It was moving away from me. Maybe it's a part of me was moving my mic away from me. But
Gerry, is there something that I'm going to have to like take notes or anything?
No, actually, I am going to be taking some notes, and I'm hoping to be able to share that with everybody as well. When the
folks, this is like you're seeing it happen. Like there's no preparation. We didn't talk about this ahead of time, so like you are seeing the real thing. So
yes, we are doing this live. We have not even really talked about it, so it's all like, yeah, this is what you see is us being real. So, and I'm just setting up my screen because I'm going to be taking my own notes, and I might make them visible. I don't think I'll do it while we're talking share screen, but I'm hoping to make it visible so people can see what my notes were as we were working. But yeah, so first I'm doing this work, and so important in parts work, if you're doing parts work with somebody, to be really attentive to your own parts. And so I'm actually going to take a moment first and notice my own parts and see if I can just have a moment and recollect, have a moment and connect with my own innermost self. So I'm going to start. I'm going to invite you to do the same with me here, and taking a deep breath and just sort of pay attention and notice your physical body. If your feet are on the ground, just take a moment and notice, how grounded you are in your own chair, on the ground. I have my arms at rest on an armrest, so I'm kind of noticing just how grounded I am physically. And I'm just paying attention to the fact that I have a part that's so excited. I'm just kind of like gonna have fun with this, and it's a very enthusiastic part, and has a certain amount of confidence, and that's wonderful. But he's also a manager who is kind of like wants to perform, right? And then I have other parts that are terrified. I'm aware of the fact that it looks like there's just about almost 200 people listening. And maybe gratefully I don't see 200 faces all at once, but I'm aware I have parts that are a little nervous, that I'm going to mess up. I'm going to say the wrong thing. This isn't going to go well, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm just going to take a moment and just respect those parts and notice them. And maybe take a moment and just say, to console or comfort those parts of me that need that, and just reassure those parts that it's going to be okay, that I do know this stuff pretty well. And even if I make a mistake, you know what, we can recover. It's going to be okay. Also reminded me, Matt and I have become friends. He's a great guy. We're working together. This is a safe place. There's nothing to worry about. So I'm just doing that little bit of work myself. So I can connect a little bit with my innermost self. I want, my core to be present and leading, even if that enthusiastic part is up front. So as I'm taking a moment and just slowing down, connecting inward, I'm looking over at you, Matt, and grateful that you're here. And I'm just going to invite you to take a moment, right, as I think you've been doing right now, to just notice what might be going on, even in your physical body right now. If you notice anything that is, any sensation, any tension or tightness, I just invite you to just notice that and let me know if you see any of that.
So the first thing, it's a little bit, it's not like butterflies like before a football or a hockey game kind of butterflies, like not that intensity, but just almost like in the top of my stomach, just like a vibe, like frenetic. It's like frenetic activity that's there.
Okay. So I'm not asking you to do anything with that frenetic activity that where you're noticing at the top of your stomach, kind of close to your chest, but just notice that sensation. And as you do, I invite you to kind of look inward. See if there's some part of you or whether it's something you can visually see, with your eyes closed, inwardly, or even if it's something you can sense, but some part of you that might be having a little agitation, and not quite butterflies, but like you said, frenetic, a little bit of activity there. And just see if you can connect with and notice that part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It feels like a manager, like managing a perception. And it was something that kind of it got engaged honestly as soon as Ruth spoke a moment ago. And it reminded me of the text I sent to our group of saying, hey, this is what introductions are supposed to look like. And I even said, like, this is my strategic discipline showing up. And then I immediately thought, I didn't follow any of that for my own introduction.
Okay.
And there was kind of like a you blew it kind of sense that was there, or I felt myself looking to the other panelists for almost some sort of for a reassurance, almost looking for like faces of disappointment on like Erin's face or Father Boniface's face or your face. So all of that was kind of, and then it was just like when you're breathing, it's just kind of like almost trying to get that. I feel like trying to control that from coming out and being seen, like the insecurity.
Yeah. Well, let's just take a moment and notice that, yeah, you had that strategic part earlier, and now this part kind of showed up, and that you noticed him in that sense of, I blew it, or I wasn't doing what I, was said I was going to do or whatnot, and looking to others for their reactions. And let's just take a moment and really notice this part. If you can slow down a little bit and we're not trying to change it. We're not trying to do anything with it. We appreciate this part, his willingness to be vulnerable and share how he felt. And so let's just take a moment and really notice him. See if you can just connect with him. And as you kind of visualize or sense him, I'd like to know what you can see, what you notice.
I get kind of a almost like a hand up, and then a hand kind of almost like concealing something behind it, like this. Like so,
Okay.
there's a person that's doing this, and then there's something back here, and like it's almost like a look at this over here, it's like this.
Okay.
Keep your focus over here. It's almost like a magician in the sense, like this, where there's some sort of sleight of hand that's taking place, that's trying to focus the attention of the audience.
Okay. Okay. Well, so it sounds like this part is really trying to protect something else or some other part of you. And can we take a moment and just, and he's doing that, just you showed it really well, like that distracting kind of motion. Could you just let him know that you appreciate his efforts? his efforts to protect you? You see that what he's trying to do is to protect you?
There's almost like it's like I want to just kind of comply, and there's a part of me that's just like, just go along with the exercise, Matt. Don't like introduce any complexity into this. But there's a like I feel very blended with this part right now.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, I think that makes sense. It would make sense that you would right now. And by blended, you just mean like it's sort of like so close to home. It's so active.
Yeah, like there's even the detaching almost feels
Mhm.
like I'm not ready for him to just
Mhm.
let go of the control that he's mastering at the moment.
Okay.
Kind of
Okay.
like him being in control.
Right. Right. Well, let's just pause for a moment again and to connect with him, right? And maybe to ask him, or we'll start maybe by acknowledging to him his effort to control or to manage is in some way trying to be helpful to you, right? So let's just start by just seeing if we can appreciate a part that is trying to protect you in some way. We don't know how, but in some way. Is he able to get a sense that you appreciate him?
Yeah, I can't appreciate it. I
Okay.
can't appreciate it.
Yeah. Yeah. What's it like for him to be a little bit appreciated? We don't even know everything that's going on, but what's it like for him? Or he hasn't shared a lot. What's it like for him to feel like you're curious about him and you appreciate him?
But it's like an acknowledgement of the like the purity of intention that's there. Like it feels kind of like, okay, you're not just being presumptuous. I'm not trying to cause trouble. This is like that
Mm-hmm.
part. It's I'm not trying to cause any trouble. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
we're all on the same team here.
Yeah.
Kind of what I'm getting, and so there's an appreciation for
Okay.
just, hey, this is
Yeah. All right. That's really great. Now, if it's okay, can you ask this part what he's afraid of will happen if he kind of lets down his hand or lets go a little bit of that control? What is he afraid might happen?
well, it's really this thing that's being hidden in the back,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's it feels like that insecure feeling that
Okay.
I was sensing, but I didn't want others to know.
Okay.
And it's like this perception management, or and this kind of ties back to a part of me that just, that unless I got it all together, you know, no, nobody's going to follow you, Matt, unless you got it all together.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to have it all together.
Okay.
That's a consistent, like, call it my golden child part.
Okay.
It's almost like the managing that perception, but that's not the golden child's not the exile. The exile is more Gerry, like this part that knows it's not the golden child, this part that is scared.
Oh,
Um, it's scared. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, can you thank this part for sharing that with you, letting you know about, this scared child, this part, this fear that has, and that this sort of sense of having to have it all together? Can you at least start by thanking this protector part? Because of course, you wouldn't want that fear to overwhelm your system, right? So he's doing a really good job of making sure that you said it exiled part isn't exposed and doesn't overwhelm. So thank him for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm a little curious, right? Curious about this part because you mentioned him, this exile part that's scared. I'm curious about how we might be able to help that part with his fear. And I'm wondering what you think, if maybe there's some deeper wisdom in you or some deeper insight in you that you want to share with, this manager part that's protecting the exile, about how we might be able to help this part with so much fear.
Mm. Well, I want to kind of tell this manager part. Like, have you considered how this, this frightened child, this whatever you want to call it, have you considered how this might actually be a strength? How, the fear might be something that's like a good thing. It's not something to hide, but it's actually like it's a good thing because it's honest, at least.
Yeah.
And like his response to that is just kind of like almost like intrigue, like, what do you mean? Like how could that fear be helpful?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now it sounds to me possibly here that there's a part of you here, another amazing manager part of you, that is super helpful and sees this fear as a strength and is kind of giving that, kind of advising this other part. And so let's appreciate that too. But ask the part of you that is sort of kind of coming up with a solution here
Mm-hmm.
to just stand back. Just if that part, would that part be willing to just hold back a little bit? Soften back a little bit. Okay. And let's turn our attention. Actually, let's turn our attention again to this part that we've been working with, this manager part, who's doing all this protecting. How do you feel toward him right now?
It's like I'd say there's an appreciation. There's an appreciation in the sense of like, it's like I know that I know that you're trying to, like, your intentions are good. Like, this protecting piece is like the intention behind your actions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like there's a whole other part that's just not even being acknowledged right now. So it's like, how can this how can you know how can this part, like, this part has some needs here too. And
Right.
I kind of want to just bring him out a little bit
Okay.
and even have some conversations with him. And
Okay. When you say bring him out, do you mean the exile part or this manager?
yeah,
Yeah.
or the
Okay.
yeah.
How does this protector feel about that? That you that you're curious about this exile part?
There's kind of like hey, what, I'll make some space, but like, don't ask me to just make any long-term commitments to stop doing what I do right now. But I can kind of like, there's a little
Mm-hmm.
curiosity here to see how this is going to play out.
Okay. Okay. Well, would the protector be willing to give us maybe just 5 minutes to meet with this exile? Would that be okay? We're not
Yeah,
going to do a whole lot, just kind of want to meet this part.
yeah. It's kind of like, yeah, okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank him for cooperating. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
So we're imagining, right? Like we asked the part that was a little bit focused on a solution to hold back a little bit. we're asking this protector part to sort of soften back. So if you almost imagine that they're kind of like wingmen now, they're to your sides. And there's sort of an invitation here to just connect with a little bit this part that's afraid.
Mm.
And we're just going to invite that part that's afraid, if he's willing. If he's willing. You know, that we're just, let him know we're just curious to meet him and understand him. And if there's, and help him if we can, but we just really want to get to know him a little bit.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
invite this part to show up. And just see if he's willing to show up in any way that he's comfortable.
Mm-hmm. I think the first word that this part says is, I'm a boy amongst men.
Mm. Okay. And as you hear that and you're noticing him, what do you notice about him? What he looks like, or what you see in his eyes, what you see in the way he's, if he's standing or sitting, or how he holds himself. What do you notice about him?
So his head's tilted forward, his eyes are down. It's almost like, it reminds me of like a little Oliver Twist kind of character with hat and hands, you know, that beggar kind of disposition. And yeah, just yeah.
How are you feeling toward him right now?
Oh, it's just like I want to love him.
Yeah. So if you could take a moment and just extend love, extend compassion to this part that's sort of looking down, and as you said, a sort of Oliver Twist kind of stance, you know, so humble and maybe and downtrodden perhaps, and just see if you can extend, however you feel comfortable, some love and compassion toward him.
Yeah, like I approach him and I actually like kind of just put my hand on his chin and like kind of slowly I bring his gaze up so that we can see each other face to face.
Hmm. Hmm. And what happens? What happens to him when he sees you face to face and he senses your compassion, your love?
It feels comforting. Like there's a assurance that's there.
Mm-hmm.
That even, you know, the fear is just kind of like, all right, almost like there's just it feels warm and secure.
So just let him soak that in. Just let him, you know, let him soak in that sense of security, that sense of love, and the fact that you care so much for him, that you're really seeing him. You're noticing how young he is. Just let him really feel seen, really feel known.
So there's been moments throughout my life where I've kind of in this kind of guided imagery, almost form, I've seen just the face of Christ looking on me, and it's just been very, very healing. And as I kind of look, even from his angle, from this part looking at me, it's no longer me looking at him. There's really this Christ-like gaze that's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jesus's face that I see looking at this young boy.
Yeah. Let him really notice that. Notice Jesus' loving gaze toward him. Notice you're present with him. Jesus is present with him. Just allow him to really feel that love. Let him feel that deep connection. Just notice if any fears that were there before, worries or anxieties or insecurities, just allow any of those to just lift, as he's being loved. That just see if you notice in your body any fears or insecurity, any tightness, any of that frenetic feeling. Just let any of that dissipate as he's being loved and seen.
There's something like growing in this child right now. It's just like there's the sense that it's kind of a swelling, but also I can feel it kind of coming out almost the side of my head, but just the freneticism is gone. There's a lightness of heart.
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of feel this, and it's almost moving from this gentle kind of warmth into a bit of an excitement. Almost like this is real. It's real. Like it's like I knew it was real. I knew it was real. And there's even like I get this glimpse, almost like in the painting of the Return of the Prodigal Son, where like there's this older son that's off to the side, and that's kind of this protector that's just kind of like looking on and being like and almost awestruck. Kind of like there's like an incredulous kind of look on his face, but like there's even like a conversion that's happening here. It's just like almost like I didn't know that this could happen. I didn't know it could be like this.
Wow. Wow. I just appreciate that about this part. Like, how wonderful. There's something opening up for him.
Like there's no even like now I'm gonna do this or no, it's just like it's really just a very restful sense right now for this small boy part that's kind of like almost like there's something like he's just matured, or he grew. And it's not like he became a man. It was just like there's still something very childlike about him, but he's this. I don't know, like there's a greater magnitude to his presence even at this point.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious if we could look over back to the protector who was so willing to take a step back, right, and do this work. How is he feeling right now? What's going on for him as he sees this young boy part being loved by you, being loved by Christ, growing in some way and looking stronger and more open and more excited even? What's going on with that protector?
It's kind of speechless.
Mm,
Like there's
okay.
kind of a look on his face like there like he needs to explain himself, but also there's kind of like a little bit of um almost like like he's looking at the way that he is showing up in the past and what he was trying to protect, and had no idea that it was that what he just saw was in some way he was like getting in the way of that.
Okay.
So there's like I want to just be like, hey, like it's all right. Like nobody's gonna condemn you here.
Right. Okay. Well, because I think this protector had a good intention all along. And now he sort of sees maybe the boy differently, and he sees how you were able to love him, sees the boy differently. Would the protector be willing at this point to come back in, maybe take the boy's hand if the boy's okay with that, and bring him in, bring him in closer to your whole system with all your parts, and let this boy be no longer in exile, but let him be a part of your system, of your inner family. Like, see, would he be interested in that?
You know, it like being kind of, you know, in this protector, I there's like this almost a sense of like shame that he feels in light of this, right?
Yeah. Right.
There's
Okay.
almost a reluctance, and even kind of even a sense of inferiority now towards this child that, you know, he once had this sense of superiority around.
Okay. Well, here's, just because of our time, I'm going to suggest that we just hold on to that. And we'd like to work with this protective part some more later. So we're not going to ignore that and that shame that he's feeling and he's carrying. Because again, I think that's part of his goodness, that he is now struggling with that. And we want to help him with that. But we're also grateful that this exiled part was willing to have this experience. And it seemed so good that he was seen differently and that he even grew. So let's just take a moment and let's thank this child for being here. Wow, how brave. He went from fear, and he went from that space to a place of just being loved and seen, and how wonderful and beautiful he is. Thank him for being here, and invite him, you know, to be a little closer in. Maybe we can make a little space for him, like a little room for him, or some safe space for him in your inner world where he can be comfortable. And thank this protector part for being willing to let us do this work. You know, and to remind him we're going to connect in with him later and just see how he's doing. And any of the other parts that you had, the strategic manager from earlier, the solution part that was willing to hold back a little bit too, who wanted to see the fear as a strength, and kind of is. Just thank all of your parts for being present. We're going to invite all the parts to, you know, to settle into their comfortable spaces within you and take a minute here as you invite them all, thank them all, and invite them all into their safe places. And gently come back into, you know, full connection with me. And, well, I know you're connected with me, but the rest of the panel, and you may have forgotten all the people that are listening, which is good. And,
the image I got was like everybody kind of returning back was like the end of the remember the show The Waltons, where they're just
right
outside the house. It's like, good night, John Boy, good night. And just everybody's kind of going to their rooms and saying good night.
I like that. I want to use that good night John Boy thing. Yeah, that is kind of a good way to see the parts kind of gently going back to their spaces, and I love that. Okay, well, thank you, Matt. That was so much fun. And what I'm going to do, a couple things. I'm going to invite the panelists to all come back because I want to hear from them and I want to hear their thoughts and reactions. I'm actually going to share the screen for a moment, and I'm going to show you what I've been drawing this time. So hopefully you can kind of see this. So can people see my little diagram? Yeah, great. Okay. And I can leave that up for a little bit, but I'm just going to briefly say, I know it's my terrible scribbly handwriting, and hopefully you can make out some of it, but the squares are all, we're all managers. The one in the bottom is a rhombus. It's not a square. So, there's the strategic part, the protector, the golden child, and the solution part. So I identified 4 parts. And we didn't really meet the golden child. We just heard about him. The solution part showed up, and I put beside it, he was saying that fear equals strength. The strategic part was here earlier. It's probably still here, hopefully. And then the manager part that I put protector is the one we worked with primarily. And he was the one who was saying, you blew it, I believe. But at the end, he was feeling shame. And then above that, the exile is a circle. And that I wrote in scared. I put on the side, he's a boy, but later he had growth. I put have to have it all together, and I'm not sure. That might be more the manager than the scared kid, but that was said in any case. And then in the top right, I put the self, who is able to love and see this scared part, and actually Christ even was a welcome visitor to kind of support the inmost self in loving this scared child and getting to see that transformation. So I wanted you to see my scribbles, because that's kind of what parts mapping is. So if I'm working with somebody, I'm taking some notes and getting a sense, so I find it helpful visually. And I will sometimes even show this to clients, or sometimes I have a whiteboard in my office, and I will actually draw on the whiteboard. There's no secrets here. I want clients to do their own parts mapping and get to know their own parts. So I'm going to close that share unless you guys want me to show anything else again. But I wanted to give that little visual. And now I would love to hear from everybody. Any thoughts? Any reactions? Go for it.
Yes, thank you, Matt and Gerry. It was wonderful. I have a question. Do you start all of your parts mapping that way, like somatically? You kind of were like, are you feeling anything in your body? And then it went into more of a visualization. I'm just wondering if there's other ways of starting, of doing parts mapping, of starting it, if you will. Oh wait, you are muted.
I am muted because I realized I was shuffling. Yeah, there definitely are other ways. That's my favorite way. I find it the most effective. I'm a big believer in, because of trauma work that I do. I'm just a big believer that we're holding a lot that's activated in our bodies, and we're a body soul composite. And so our bodies are reflecting what's going on in our souls and in our minds. And so I just find it the most powerful, the most quick way. But that, what you're really referring to is a trailhead. And so in IFS, they use the word trailhead. And that's just basically the path to connect with a part. And so there are other ones. A memory could be a trailhead. A feeling, an emotion that they're having could be a trailhead. There's a lot of different, even something that, some thought could be a trailhead as well. So you could get to a part in lots of different ways. Great question.
Yeah, because I just listened to an example of parts mapping, and it was with a woman who was overeating. So like that trailhead would have been a habit that she wanted to stop, but there were like a lot of different parts moving even within that habit. There were managers, exiles, and so it was an interesting. Yeah, I was just wondering if that was just preference for you, and if there were other ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there are definitely other ways. And I'm an EMDR trained therapist and consultant, and I love doing EMDR for some deep trauma work, and I combine it with parts work. I find that's so effective, and so much. So it's sort of bred in me to connect with the body, and that the somatic is so important. And that if we miss that, we're missing a whole lot. But a person could do parts work without, it isn't always about trauma, right? It isn't always about anxiety. And so it may not be manifesting that way. And so I think it's just healthy to connect with our parts. And so sometimes you could just get into a calm or quiet state. I would say like more of a contemplative state, and look inward and invite parts to be present.
Mm.
And it's not always about having to heal some wound. I mean, that was so cool that I wasn't even necessarily assuming we were going to get to an exile today in this exercise, and it's just what happened. I was assuming we were just going to identify managers and whatnot, but we did. That was so cool. We got to an exile. But sometimes I just think it's healthy every day to check in with all of your parts, even if it's all good news. It's just being in harmony. It's just being fully aware of all and aware of all the inner resources you have. One thing I would have liked to have seen or spent more time, I could have spent a lot more time with Matt. I wanted to explore. There's a bunch of things there that I would have loved to have went further with, but I was somewhat conscious of time. But often, like, I would have liked to get to know that child part better, because I bet he's amazing and wonderful. And he mentioned being childlike and what it would be like for that childlike part to be more active in his regular kind of system. And I think we all, Christ said, to be childlike. We need to become like children, into the kingdom. And so, anyway, I would have spent more time with that. So I think, just connecting inward with your parts to allow your child parts to just play is fantastic. All right. Any other thoughts? Father Boniface, I am dying to hear what you think.
Well, I thought it was wonderful. I really appreciate your vulnerability, Matt, and just allowing us into that inner space. It was really, really beautiful to see. And your gentleness, Gerry, is really so sweet. I was really appreciating the movements and I saw a couple of the questions that just went down the chat. I haven't seen all of them, but I'd like to speak into those as how I'm hearing this from the point of a spiritual director. One thing is, I love to work with Matt after he's worked with you, Gerry, and he can tell me about the parts work that he did, and then I'm getting a sense of what some of those parts are and ways that we might work together in terms of, just the role that I'm going to play in relation to maybe that exile. I love that little Oliver Twist guy, and I want to be his best friend. And that can grow in spiritual direction, spiritual fatherhood, and also helping him to connect. Jesus was already coming into that as part of Matt's initiative, so maybe strengthening that connection in prayer. There was a question about why you, Gerry, noticed Matt's solution in when you asked about whether there's some wisdom for caring for that little child, and he decided to come up with an answer about the fear and some things around a strength for that. And so I appreciated your perspective. One of the things I've learned from being a novice at parts work is when that solution shows up. So there was a certain amount of energy and strategy, and I knew also that we were getting apart. So that also is very helpful for spiritual direction. When I know that I'm working with, sometimes it's somebody who says, well, I just really need to pray more. Well, that's coming from a different place than someone who says, I love Jesus, and I'm kind of trying to understand, sometimes I don't pray as much as I would like to, and I'm trying to grow in that in my life. So it's a whole different kind of energy, presentation, feeling that's going with it. And noticing different parts showing up is, I think, very helpful for spiritual direction. I was wondering if how much I would do. I've never sort of shifted into a place of asking people to ask a part. I've never kind of totally shifted into that mode of parts work in spiritual direction. I tend to do a little bit more direct access and just kind of noticing how things are coming together. Or if somebody has done parts work, to have them share that with me, and then we work around that. But anyway, so a few of my thoughts. It was delightful to watch. I was texting with someone along the way and just delighting in your approach and your heart, Gerry, really, and Matt's vulnerability.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, Matt has done a lot of work, so he was fun to do this with, and I didn't have to, I might have had to like do a lot more prepping with someone that had never done this before, didn't really understand what parts even were. So we were able to quickly get there, which was great. I love that you noticed that about the solution part. Really, it's any, it's a part when there's an agenda. So if the part is saying anything that's an agenda, it's not, that's not coming from the innermost self. The innermost self is really just, imbued with like compassion, curiosity, kind of insight, wisdom. It's not trying to do something so much as just embodying those that energy, I guess. So it just feels different. And we can have spiritual parts that are absolutely fantastic and resourceful and all that, but it's not the innermost spiritual self. And we sometimes, it's easy to confuse those two. But yeah, thank you.
I can tell you also, like experientially, when that solution showed up, when you asked him to step aside, I was like, okay, I've seen, we come across this in coaching and in spiritual direction as well, but it was a completely different place that I got to, where it was like the state when it was just like entering into that exile. Like I knew that's where the Lord wanted it to be, or where it needed to be in that moment. And there was, I don't know, it really just, it was very gentle, kind of the way that you said, hey, and like that's kind of like a trained ear, trained mind, trained, practitioner to kind of recognize that solution thinking or another manager part, showing up like that. So I felt like I was in good hands.
So I feel like that's a good intro into just what the perspective that I bring, and that is from the strengths perspective, because you're so well versed on strengths as well, and so you kind of almost named those parts on the front end, even, right? The strategic discipline, and so you sort of named those. But then I was fascinated and really excited when Gerry noticed your strategic part and your solution part, because your solution part would probably come from your restorative, right? Or something like that. And so I loved that insight, and it just brings up the question of how strengths can be used by our parts, right? Like either overused or underused, squashed or brought way up to drive by parts or distract from exiles. You know what I mean? Yeah, that was fascinating. I appreciate that. And I just want to say thank you so much, Matt. That was amazing.
I don't know if that's me beeping. I'm hearing a lot of beeping. I don't know if that's chat's landing, but thank you, Ruth. I think we need more time, I think, and I'd love to explore that whole connection of strengths and parts, because I think there's definitely, definitely a lot there. Appreciate that. Pat, are you still with us? I don't see
Kind of
you.
everybody joining your community right now, Gerry.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I did put it in the chat, the community, it's free. The YouTube video, I'm going to post this on this. I just started this brand new, so please go in and like it, because nobody likes it right yet. I just literally opened it this morning. But I'll be posting that and other things on there. So.
Yeah, I just want to say, Gerry, that I just so affirm what Ruth had mentioned. And in our work, a big part of what we do is to train Clifton Strengths coaches. And now what we're doing is we're using parts work with leaders we work with and coaches that we train. And we are finding, as Ruth said, the overuse of Clifton Strengths is really, as Ruth says, a fast pass to the parts work, a fast pass to the front of the parts work line. So we're finding, and I find that in myself. So I'm high in influencing and high in strategic thinking. And when my exiles are kind of triggered, those parts sometimes can become overused and damage some of my relationships. So there's a lot of work to be done around really the integration of strengths and parts work. So we're doing a lot of that with the Human Formation Coalition in our training and our coaching right now. So I'm looking forward to going even deeper into that. So
Awesome. That's great. I noticed a couple of questions in the Q&A. There's a Q&A thing I didn't even notice was there. And someone asked, James, hey, good to know that you're here. I know James from the Institute of Ministry Formation. That's awesome. But he said there was a lot more anthropomorphism within this parts mapping than he expected. He wondered about pronouns. And I that's a great question, actually. I tend to use the pronoun that belongs to the biological sex of any person, but in particular who's there, right? So I would naturally say he, say with Matt, although it's not out of the question that there could be a part that presents female, or or a female who has a part that presents male. Like, that's not out of the question, because a part can appear as a dragon. A part can appear as an ogre or a wall or it can appear like, these are just kind of manifestations. And so I would use a different pronoun if the part was presenting that way for some reason. But typically I'm using the pronouns for whatever that person's, whatever their normal sex is. So this is a great question. I'm open to more discussion on that or more thoughts. And then there was another question before that. Any reason I didn't invite Christ to speak to the part after asking if the part wanted to hear from Christ? Okay. If the part, so I don't even remember now that I asked the part if they wanted to hear from Christ. I don't remember. I honestly don't remember that. I'd have to go back and
I don't think, I don't remember you doing it. It's I think it just stayed with the gaze that was there. And I know that part was just like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit here and just.
This is a great question, and it's a great topic to explore further. And I could spend a whole hour exploring it. I think it's so interesting. I'm always a little careful. I don't ever want to be manipulating Christ or any saint or angel. And so I'm a little uncomfortable with that, me instigating that, because I feel like that might be a part of me with an agenda. And I feel like that would be spiritually unethical. But I am very okay with inviting Our Lady to be present, Christ to be present. If the person has a particular saint or whatever, to invite them to be present. If Matt was to say, was to say in that session, like when I was saying, like, just notice Christ's gaze or whatnot. If he was to say Christ was saying X to me, I would, unless it was something obviously strange and bizarre, I would just go with that. So I'm open to that happening. I'm not going to make it happen, because that's not my job. Let the Holy Spirit do the Holy Spirit's job. and sometimes when that happens, amazing, interesting spiritual thing happens. And one of the chapters in my book on spiritual confidants, that I described that happening with Our Lady of Guadalupe. And I certainly didn't come up with that on my own. I didn't push that on the client whatsoever. It happened, I think, because that client was entering into that experience, and Our Lady worked with that client. I just happened to be there taking notes. So if anyone has some more thoughts, go ahead. Yeah.
Gerry, I have a quick question just to make a distinction on what you just said. So I think I kind of missed the first part. I just want to be clear on this. So you said it's okay inviting them in, but not kind of like being like, does Jesus say something to you or something? Like, is that where you were saying, like, where is it crossing the line? Just because I think that would be helpful for everybody on here who is in that formational role.
Right. Like, I wouldn't say, what is Jesus saying to you right now? For one thing, Jesus may not be saying anything right now. And but if you notice, there's a lot of silence in this work.
Yeah.
And it was appropriate at certain points that there was just silence, because Because if I'm asking a question like, can you ask this part, or what are you afraid of, or whatever, or can you notice this gaze, or whatever, there should be silence, and a long silence. As long as, sometimes I've had clients be in silence for like 3 minutes, which is a really long time when you're just sitting there. And so, and that's absolutely fine. And then after, I'm like, I want to know what happened. I want to know what just happened there in that 3 minutes, right? So if they're in that contemplative recollective state and they're saying they're experiencing Christ, then I let them have that time. That's their time with Christ. And they may report back to me what happened. That's how I see it. It's not my job to manage that experience, other than to facilitate the possibility of it happening. If
Got it.
that's makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
that's helpful. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think there might be more questions that have popped up in the question section now that people see it. Their self. What happens to our parts when we lead with the self? Okay. If we don't want to lead with our parts and we want to lead with ourself, what happens to our parts when we lead with self? So really, typically, depending what's going on, typically you have parts that are self-led. So the self is leading the parts, is the way I typically see it. And so it's like they're working in tandem, and the parts love that. They love to be self-led. And that's typically how it happens. It's a pretty pure state to be operating from the inmost self alone. Maybe in a deep sense of prayer, I would say that happens. We can have that in a deep intimacy with another person, where we're really no parts. The issue is the parts aren't blended in with the self. The parts are unblended, and the self is sort of present. But the way I see it, and there might be disagreement in different approaches in parts work, but I think it's the self who is sort of leading or managing various parts at different times. So if you have a husband part, let's say, or a wife part, then it's the self leading that. And so when you're communicating with your partner, your spouse, you're still that part of you that's a husband or wife, and it's the self is kind of like flowing, if you will, through that part, and the part isn't on its own, so to speak, or blended with the self to the point where it doesn't have that self connection at all. Hope I explained that well.
If I can just excuse myself, and thank you. I also have a meeting that I'm late for.
No
And
worries.
I might suggest, it seems like there are a lot of questions. I wonder if a follow-up session is a good way to
We'll
handle
keep
that. But anyway, I'll
everyone
watch
posted.
the video.
Yes, thank you. So blessed to have you here, Father. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
And I think that is a great point. I think we had talked about doing a follow-up. So if people want to follow up, you can definitely, let us know, and we will keep you in contact. If you join the Transfiguration Life community, we will post something on there. I know in Metanoia, if you're part of that community, they will post stuff on there, or Pat's Human Formation Coalition as well. So we're all kind of partnering together in this, and we will keep everyone informed. We'll do a few more questions, and we will wrap up probably in maybe 5 to 10 minutes or so. And I don't have to be the only one who fields the answers, so anybody could jump in too. Somebody, Obi asks, is there a possibility of dissociation happening in those scenarios where part is appearing as a dragon? So it depends a little how you define dissociation, because on some level, when you go into a deep contemplative prayer state, you can say to some extent you're healthily dissociated in that moment. But by dissociation, if you mean it the way that I would use it from a trauma perspective, that's where you're disconnected from your body. You're disconnected in some sense from yourself, the innermost self. You're at a sort of like, I would see it as a part, and is sort of like you've disconnected. And usually that's out of a fear response. What I typically find, if a part is playing the part of a dragon, there isn't typically dissociation going on. it's just a protective measure to keep a dissociated part dissociated. So when you actually connect with that dragon-ish part, and you realize and you work with it, you befriend it, believe it or not, then the dragon often will transform and won't stay a dragon. And then eventually that part, like what I did with Matt, I asked permission. If you notice, I asked permission from the protector to allow the exile to be approached. And so eventually what would happen there is that dragon would give permission, right? It wouldn't be a dragon likely anymore, and would give permission, and the dissociated part would actually come into conscious awareness. So hopefully that answers that.
There's a question, Gerry, I think that it's interesting, even from a coaching perspective. So Ruth, I'd love to get your take on it. Erin also as well here. But somebody asked about, so we identified this protector part and kind of the agenda, and then saying, okay, is it good at that point to like kind of identify a memory from the past of when did you first have this protector kind of show up, or kind of start to go from where we were, in the present, and then go back into the memory. And I imagine, Gerry, you might do it a little differently than what we might do as a coach, but and Ruth as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not sure I understand what your question is as far as,
I'll see if I can find it, but it was Ruth, it was something. Would it be helpful to kind of, once you identify that kind of that protector part, to be like, when did you first show up in my history? Like, let's see if we can find the memory of where the origin of that protector.
Well, I would be careful not to steer the part, right? Like, I mean, I would certainly stay curious. I mean, the way I would the way that I would coach would be just to stay in that compassionate curiosity and just ask, what it wants to share, how old it feels, what does it want to bring to the system? I would just stay real curious with it. And often it will automatically tell me how old it feels. Right. And then we know, I don't know, Gerry, did you want to add anything to that from your?
I mean, I definitely go there in terms of, I would have spent a lot more time with that protector, and I definitely ask the questions, like, especially if it's doing something maladaptive, like when did you learn that you needed to, like fight this way, or when did you learn, and then, but see, it might be a difference a little bit with coaching and counseling, in that I am actually looking to find that exile to do some healing work with it. So that's my, my kind of goal in the end. Or it's not the only goal, it's the next step goal. But so I would, and actually links to somebody's question on here. What do you do if parts that are not willing to step back? And I think if a part's not willing to step back, then I work with it. Like, so it would just mean, like, I can't go any further. I'm not going to try to force my way into an exile or force my way. If there's a part that's objecting to me working with another part and it won't step back, then I spend my time with that and find out, what's your concern? What's going on, that you're afraid of what we're about to do. And that's just what you have to do, because you're not, I think that you're not ignoring or dismissing or any part that has if it has that much of a concern, then you have to take it seriously. So
there's been some questions also on just the interplay with deliverance ministry. So in deliverance ministry, you might be doing some binding prayers, some renouncing that's going on, and renouncing a spirit of fear. And I guess it's kind of like, what's the interplay? how does this interact, or is this something that is, oil and water when it comes to doing parts work? The two don't necessarily work well together, or is there a way for the two to
Well, it's
work?
fascinating a little bit with Richard Schwartz, right, who developed the particular IFS approach. Very secular, right? And one of the things that they encountered was parts they couldn't explain that they called an unattached burden. And the closest way to describe these are demons. And even though they're not going to call it a demon, maybe, but that's kind of how they're sort of presenting. I personally have not experienced that uh, almost at all, and so I don't think it's common, but I think that it's possible. And so I just think parts can show up as like they're demons or dragons, and it's not demonic per se, right? And so I don't rush to that assumption, but I think there's a possibility of that. And it's not my particular ministry to do, like, I'm not in an exorcism ministry or anything like that. So I think the typical type of, I would say, spiritual warfare that I'm likely to encounter is going to be more that obsession, right? And that influence, where I would see that it's not where various natural insecurities and negative thoughts that parts might have. I think the demons want to irritate that and want to, like, excite that and make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and because they're happy for us to stay in our fears and our insecurities and our obsessions and our self-hatred. They want that. So there would be a place there if that seems to be what's going on. I just think my own view a little bit, or my own perspective on it, is that when the inmost self is in deep connection with God, right? When the soul is obviously cleared of mortal sin, and the parts are unblended, and you're accessing that innermost self, God's grace is so amazing, and I see it as flowing through the inmost self to all the parts. I just really think that whatever demons scatter at that. I mean, unless you've got a full-blown possession situation, that's different. But the demons just scatter, and grace flows. And when the self is truly in a Christ-like way loving the parts, it's just so much. It's so powerful. It's so beautiful. So, great question.
Gerry, I have one more question before I pop off, actually, but it has something to do with the will, and kind of like, okay, so like there's one person, the self, right? And then there's all these different parts, and obviously there's one will because it's within one person. And so, like, can you see it kind of going down this path where people will be like, oh, I like don't really need to, like, I don't know, confess that because it was a part of me that did this, right? Like, you see what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, so it's kind of weird. Where's that line of
Mm-hmm.
I guess abdicating
Mm-hmm.
responsibility as like a Catholic human
Yeah.
person?
It's a great question. I get this, and so I try to address this to some extent in the book. It's just a difficult one, but the we're one human person, and as a human person with one will, we're the ones who sin when we sin. So no one part is responsible for all of our sinning. Now, we can have a part that's so blended, that is so, like, and especially in the case of severe addiction, or maybe even severe trauma and dissociative behavior, that the part is so blended with the self, and it's affecting the will so powerfully that it would meet the criteria of a mitigating consent, right? So that's where a person might not be responsible fully for their actions in that way, and so maybe their action wouldn't be considered a mortal sin in that not having consent. But other than that, we truly have our parts are influencing, they're influencing the will. And if they're burdened and they've got, negative beliefs and thoughts and all that kind of stuff, then they're kind of like our passions, right? They're inflamed by the passions or whatnot, and they're negatively causing our will to be out of order with our heart, with our intellect, and therefore the human person chooses to do the wrong thing, right? So you can never say, well, my part made me do it, unless you meet the criteria that I was describing earlier. Then maybe you could say that.
Even in that case, right? Like, it's not even like the will isn't like completely, like, it's not like impossible to overcome with the will, but like it's impaired. The will would be impaired in that situation where what you were talking about.
Yeah, would be impaired, right? The only way I would see it as impossible would be like a full-blown possession, or the extreme end of a parts world, which would be DID, right? Like a dissociative identity, where literally your parts are operating and you don't even have memory of it. That's extreme, right? We all have parts, we all have multiple personalities in a way, but most of us do not have DID. So, if you're literally so dissociated that you have parts that are operating as individuals pretty much, and the rest of you has no memory of it, then I would say that would be a clear case of consent being almost fully compromised.
Okay.
And you need medical help. You need help to get to sort that out. You can't just do that by your will alone.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
great. Wow, great questions. We're going to have to wrap up. There's a lot more questions. So guess what? We are going to have more of these. I think it's been so much fun, and I really love doing it, honestly, and love all these questions. And so we're going to have more of these. So belong to one of our networks or all of our networks, and join Transfiguration Life, and for sure. And we will obviously let you know when these things happen, and we'd love to have more time with your questions. I'm going to save them and hold on to those for next, because we just don't have enough time to answer all these great questions, but I appreciate them. All right. God bless you all. Thank you to all of our panelists, Ruth and Matt and Erin and Father Boniface and Pat. And thank you all for coming. God bless you. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys.
See y'all. Bye.
Thanks, Gerry.